my parents were always open about um, and supportive about our Cherokee heritage, and we'd come back to visit my grandparents. All my people, all my cousins are here in Oklahoma. The one thing that kind of helped me to realize that there was a some identity stuff that was going on in my family was just seeing that my dad was absolutely different than any of the people that I knew in up north.
Have you ever felt that unsettling shift? That moment when one chapter slams shut and leaves you in a strange and in-between space. You got no map, no compass, you're just wondering what could happen next. You just heard from our guest today. And what if I told you that navigating these tricky transitions from the ending through the neutral zone and into a bold new beginning is the secret to unlocking incredible growth? As an author, coach, and business consultant, I've guided countless individuals through their own pivots. And believe me, as a former pastor myself, I know a thing or two about profound endings and unexpected new beginnings. So in season 4 of the How People Grow podcast, we're pulling back the curtain on some truly mind-bending transformations. Imagine this: a pastor whose house burns down and becomes a rock star. A former Mormon finding herself through plant medicine. A corporate leader loses his job and ends up delivering pizzas. And a woman who trades the boardroom for a hut in a faraway land. These are just some of the stories we're going to share. And these aren't just stories. For some of us, they could be blueprints. Join me, David Achata, as we uncover the raw, often messy, and utterly inspiring ways people don't just survive change, but they thrive. Thanks for being here. Let's get started. Today I'm interviewing a new friend, and I have the privilege of talking to Tim Ross. And Tim Ross is a lifelong pastor, missionary, teacher, and he's made some really cool transitions in the last few years, and I wanted to ask him about it because of his story. So, Tim, welcome, and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about who you are.
Thank you so much, David, and Osio, everyone. It's good to be here with you today. I am Tim Ross, and I am a Cherokee from the Western Band, Oklahoma. I am a father and a husband. I've got 4 kids. I live in East Tennessee. I've been a pastor for about 45 years, and also I've lived abroad. I've been a missionary, been a teacher in seminaries, and it's really good to be here. It's good to know you, David, and great to get to know you better. And I'm looking forward to this conversation. So God bless you.
Yeah, thank you. Me too. Yeah, so Tim, we met through some mutual acquaintances, and I learned about your work with NAIITS. And would you tell us a little about what NAIITS stands for and
Yeah,
what you
sure.
do there?
Certainly. NAITS is an organization that was founded by First Nations and Native Americans in Canada and the United States to, it's a group of people who are working, Native people who are working to contextualize the gospel and understand the way of Jesus in their own cultural context. For most Native people, much of their experience of church and church community has absolutely been shoehorned into sort of Western settings, and many of the indigenous forms of worship and theology have been definitely Western and white as well. And a lot of folks have wanted to hear the message and have wanted to understand the way of Jesus and have just sort of accepted that. But lots of folks in these days have grown to the point to where they're also wanting to reach back and to tie into some deeper and older forms of spirituality and wisdom from their native heritage. And so NAITS has a couple of different wings, a couple of different things they do. One thing they have is it's a group that works in community development in Canada and the US. And the part that I'm involved with is simply called NAITS, which initially stood for North American Institute for Indigenous Theological Studies. And it's a graduate seminary, accredited graduate seminary that was founded by Native people for Indigenous people and their allies. And initially, they thought, hey, this is going to be something for North American Indians, for Native people, for Indigenous folks here in the North American context. And as soon as they launched this thing, they started getting requests and folks showing up from Australia, Aboriginals and Maori people from New Zealand, and folks from Central America and South America and the Philippines. So Thailand, just all kinds of folks are coming into this who are longing for um, some more contextually true versions of of how their indigenous heritage connects with um, with the pathway of faith and particularly the way of Jesus.
Hmm.
So I've gotten involved with them. I've started to do some teaching and plugging away with them. I'm really enjoying that group, that organization.
Hmm.
I'm hoping you're
Yeah.
going to get more involved too, David.
Oh yeah, me too. I wanted to go to the symposium this year, but it conflicted with my family vacation we had planned already. So next year, I'm probably like 99% sure I'll be there. And for our listeners, Tim and I live just a few hours apart. We have never been together in person. We've talked on the phone, and Tim and I are going to spend some time looking around at some of his family history and family land. Tim, tell us just briefly about who is in your lineage as far as in the Cherokee,
Yeah, sure.
story.
Yeah. So, um, three of my grandparents are Cherokee, and we live. All my family's from Oklahoma and the region that formerly was just called Indian Territory. And for those of you that know any of your history, the Cherokee originally all lived in the east, the southeast, in Tennessee, Alabama, South Carolina, southwestern Virginia, a little bit of eastern Kentucky, and Georgia. And way back in the mid 1700s, my first Scottish ancestor into this part of the world came as an orphan and a young man. His name was Daniel Ross, and he joined a little trading party, folks who were taking a flatboat down into Cherokee country to barter and sell and trade. And he was captured by some Cherokee and held for ransom. And there was another Scottish guy who heard about this kid who was in some hot water, and he's a guy that had already married in with the Cherokee, and this would have been down around the area where Chattanooga is now, or between Knoxville and Chattanooga. Um, and so he helped get this young man released, and the guy went to work in his home, and eventually he married one of his daughters. And so that's kind of the beginning of my Cherokee Scottish
Hmm.
heritage, and that would have been late 1700s.
Hmm.
Um, our family has had a lot to do in leadership in the Cherokee Nation, and for those of you that maybe don't know all the history, the Cherokees were removed along with a lot of the other tribes of the Southeast in the 1830s, and up in the decades before that, they were fighting tooth and nail to try to hang on to their land. It's just this flood of colonists came in and were land hungry and gold hungry and resource hungry, and it was just a hard, ugly time for the Cherokees. Um, some of my ancestors were in leadership at that time. John Ross was the chief of the Cherokee Nation for about 40 years, from the 1820s to the 1860s. He was the chief through the time when the Cherokees were removed on the Trail of Tears and were driven west into what is now Oklahoma, what was then simply called Indian Territory. And then in my family line, we have two other chiefs of the Cherokees, a man named William Potter Ross, who was, of course, related to John. And then on my grandmother's side, a man named Lewis Downing, who was a really fascinating guy. He was a Baptist convert and preacher in old Cherokee country in the East. He was a Civil War chaplain, um, and he became a chief who helped to reconcile and bring more unity among the Cherokees after the Civil War. And this would be like immediately after the death of Chief John Ross.
Hmm.
So we've got quite a bit of history in in the leadership of the Cherokee Nation. And so my family grew up, uh, in the West. My grandparents, in about 1908 to 1910, they were dividing up the land, apportioning the land, and that's a whole other story. But my grandparents married about that time and homesteaded a farm in this area, and that's the place where I am today. We're still on that farm. My dad's in his 90s and still lives here. I have five siblings, and so yeah, a couple of them still live around as well. But we're here on the Cherokee Reservation and living the dream.
Yeah.
So I'm back. It's really interesting because I live in the old Cherokee homeland. Um,
Hmm.
but my roots are also here in the West.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah.
so that's a little bit about
Mm.
some of our ancestry.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. Yeah, for me, listening in on it, though I'm not Cherokee, I do feel a lot of connection to the Cherokee story because I grew up here. And I remember when I was a kid, we would go over to Red Clay State Park for the events over there. And and we looked like the Cherokee somewhat.
Mhm.
And so
Sure.
we would be asked, are you Indian? And my dad being from South America and South American Indian, he would say, yeah. And they would say, what's your tribe? Achata, the Achata tribe, which sounds like Echoda. So it was kind of a fun little banter we had with some of the folks over there. But what I used to do when my kids were younger, when my daughter was in high school, is I would take her and her friends out, on the weekend, and we'd go over to the Hiwassee River out there in Charleston. And I would say, do you know where you're standing? I would say, Hiwassee River? Yeah. I'd say, but do you know that this was once the border of the Cherokee Nation and what would become, the United States as we know it today? And no, we didn't know that. And so I would just say, what do you think it was like, to be on the riverbank and look across and say, wow, what is the United States, or what is the Cherokee Nation? And to just teach them the story of the land on which they live, which most of them did not know.
Sure.
And my transition to embracing my own roots has just been probably in the last 5, 6 years, which has gotten me a lot more interested in the history of indigenous peoples. And when I thought about this interview, I thought as I met you, it would be really neat to hear your story about, what was Tim like before he went deeper into embracing his story. And you've always had obviously a connection to it because of your origins, the land, the people. But I know what happens to so many people, regardless of, their ethnic lineage is we just want to fit in and be like everybody else. And at some point we realize, oh, I'm unique. I have a story I need to go deeper into. So would you share with us what was the pre, transition deeper into your story, Tim? What did he look like and what did he do?
Yeah, thanks. Certainly, I've always known and appreciated it at some level, my Cherokee heritage, since I was young. Um, I Our family, as you kind of alluded to, um, experienced displacement from both the eastern places where our people used to live, and then my parents, young, newly married, went north to work, like a lot of Southerners,
Right.
and we ended up in northern Indiana, and as the family was growing, I think that my parents said, we got to feed these kids and take care of them, and so they kind of settled down in northern Indiana for a while. So my growing up years were away from the tribe as well,
Mm.
and away from the people. And so, in a very real sense, yeah, there's been some mileage between
Right.
um, my native community and our family growing up. At the same time, um, my parents were always open about um, and supportive about our Cherokee heritage, and we'd come back to visit my grandparents. All my people, all my cousins are here in Oklahoma, and uh, the one thing that kind of helped me to realize that there was some identity stuff that was going on in my family was just seeing that my dad was absolutely different than any of the people that I knew in up north.
Mm.
Um, he wasn't at home there totally, although he functioned and did okay. Um, he he stuck out, and he always was kind of a quiet resistor of some of the ways that people thought and acted, and he was always an outlier in that place. And he also very frequently would wear maybe native jewelry or always had a straw hat on, um, probably a feather or two in it. And anyway, just always was retained some of his heritage, no matter what he was doing. Um, so also from an early age, I realized that my heritage was on my mind. As I've looked back and looked at my artwork, I can see that it's just filled with native images from a pretty early age, and
Yeah.
and up through high school. I can see that even into my college years. Um, we also just realizing the stories of my relatives. I had uncles and aunts who attended um, Haskell Indian Nations University. My grandparents were both educated in Cherokee residential schools, Cherokee male and female seminaries. They called it back then. I had a brother and a sister who both attended Native American College in Muskogee, Oklahoma. So for us, there was never like a hard disconnect from our people and from our heritage, but it also wasn't something that was I wasn't just taught the ways of our people
Yeah.
and our particular story either. Some of it was passed down orally, our story, um, but also I think I would say that for me, where my story began to deepen happened. I was a reader, and so I just tried to read everything I could get my hands on. And a lot of that included interest in other cultures, other beliefs, other customs, and so I definitely dug into to a lot of books and resources that were available at the time. I grew up in the 60s and 70s, and that was a time when, especially the 70s, was a time when the Indian movement was rolling and gaining some political traction. And so I read some of those old rabble rousers, Vine Devoria,
Yeah,
uh, Jesus, Custer died for your sins.
right.
God is red. Um, N. Scott Momaday. Lots and lots of Cherokee history and culture as well. And so I kind of plugged into that and paid attention to that. And then when it came time to go to college, I ended up going to a little school, liberal arts school down in East Tennessee. And the first time I ever visited East Tennessee, something really profound happened inside of me. For the first time in my life, I felt a deep sense of connection with the land and a deep sense that I had come home somehow. And so I was in this place where I'd never seen with my own eyes, and yet it felt like home to me.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
uh, and I didn't put it together initially, but I really think that land carries memory, and uh, and I think that places where people have lived for a long time retains something of the sense of those people. And so East Tennessee, old Cherokee country with a lot of old Cherokee names, began to kind of work on my soul a little bit as well. I did plug in some down on the Cherokee. There's a little Cherokee reservation, of course, in Western North Carolina, and I did my student teaching down there. Probably would have stayed if there had been an opening, but there wasn't at that time, and so um, I did get to know some of those folks and spend time working there. But I ended up kind of aiming more towards ministry after that. And so, anyway, maybe I'll just stop there and ask you if you have any questions in particular just about the growing up years, but then I'll tell you about the cross-cultural journey we made
Yeah.
following that.
Yeah, so many questions. I feel like listening to you, I just want to just like if I could wind you up, and just let you just keep on going, just to watch and see where you land. It's so interesting. Um, but back to your growing up years, you mentioned your dad was a quiet resistor.
Yeah.
What specifically were you seeing in him that really sort of it caused you to pause that maybe planted some seeds that later you would come back to?
Yeah. Um, I would definitely see that that area it was a pretty white area. It was an area where Native people had lived as well and had been cleared out of that area, and yet nobody ever talked about that. Nobody ever acknowledged that. Nobody ever explored any of that history. But my dad always kind of marched to the beat of his own drum. He always sort of did his own thing, and one of the things that I noticed that he did that was very out of step with that small farming community in which we lived. Back in the 70s, we started to see the first Spanish-speaking um, working migrants who came up into our area, not just to work on the harvest, but to take jobs, take wives, and make a life for themselves. And it, it- my dad immediately his ears perked up, and he began in quiet ways to befriend these folks who were different than he was, spoke a language that he didn't speak, but he had a bunch of small rental places, and he absolutely opened up places for these folks to live. Um, he befriended them. We became part of their family. They became part of our family. I can remember coming home from college one year, and here my dad is in his overalls and his straw hat, and he had a little pocket translator, one of the early kind of versions, where you punch in names and it
Right.
gives you the Spanish word.
Uh-huh.
And he's trying to learn a little Spanish, which has just shocked me and
Right.
surprised me. Um, these guys, of course, there was a lot of prejudice in that town. They got a lot of blowback, and it was my dad, who befriended him, who, when they got in trouble, who bailed them out of jail, who did a little marriage counseling with them when they needed it, and
Mm.
who helped raise their kids. And so
Mm-hmm.
that small beginning expanded to where, there were scores of people that he's influenced and befriended
Mm.
through the years, and that
Yeah.
was taught me a lot of important lessons and helped me to appreciate my dad in ways
Mm.
that perhaps I didn't so much before.
How do you think that formed your view of how you show hospitality to the outsider?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think that that's one of the beautiful things about uh, native life, and I think we have a sense of hospitality that goes deep. I've just been reading a book on Tecumseh and the Shawnee, and it talked a lot about the Shawnee in terms of other the tribes that were around them, and they called some of them what they call one tribe their older brothers, another tribe their younger siblings, another tribe their uncles and aunts,
Mm.
and I think that there is a connection that happens among indigenous people, and I think that maybe we kind of get one another a bit more, and um, and certainly I think we open up, we have the capacity to open up hospitality for people that we didn't previously know in powerful ways. And that was certainly something that I think I began to pick up from my parents, and that's developed even further um, in the years since.
Hmm.
But I have both been received in cultures that were not my own, and I've been able to receive others
Yeah.
and to extend a welcome and a
Mm.
place at the table
Hmm.
for lots and lots of other people through the
Yeah.
years.
Yeah. So years later, you end up doing some cross-cultural work. So share a bit about that, and I think also while you're sharing, maybe from the perspective of, how do you reconcile cross-cultural ministry work as an Indigenous person,
Hmm.
knowing what quote missionary work did to Indigenous
Hmm.
people, and that it sort of leveled, or was it attempted to level the culture. So
Hmm.
share a little about how you ended up in that world and how you approached it.
Yeah, absolutely. First of all, I think it is a it's a nuanced answer to say what missionary work or what Western missions did, or it did a lot of things, and um, and there were not just homogenous kinds of approaches that people have taken through the years,
Hmm.
and that was certainly true among the Cherokee as well. Some of those earliest groups, they were pretty buttoned down and had a pretty colonized approach, and the early groups didn't have much success in sharing the way of Jesus with the Cherokee. Um, but then there were some really good people. There were some people who valued the Cherokee as people and saw them as human beings, 100%, and who learned their language, who lived among them, who ate their food from their hospitable tables,
Hmm.
and who slept in their homes. Uh, there were some missionaries who went to jail for the Cherokees, who were fighting against their removal. And when the U.S. government told them it was illegal for them to be in among the Cherokee anymore, they some of them went to jail for a couple of years, and,
Wow.
and several of them moved out west with them, traveling with them on the Trail of Tears. So
Yeah.
there's sort of been a different kinds of approaches and responses to Native people, and I think that was true for us as well. I've come to believe that the person of Jesus is good news for Native people. I think that Jesus is a Native person. He is Jesus was an indigenous Jew, living living in a place. If you believe that he was God's son and sent from God, there's a fascinating verse in Gospel of John that talks about um, the Word, the eternal Word became flesh, and then the Greek says, and he pitched his tent among us.
Yeah.
Uh, he dwelt among us,
Hmm.
but literally pitched his tent
Hmm.
among us. Um, and so I find it really fascinating that when um, the Creator wanted to communicate uh, the best of the Creator self to people, that it didn't come down on golden tablets, and it didn't come to people simply through white people. It came by the Creator uh, in fleshing uh, in human form in a helpless baby
Mm.
in a backwater of the empire to impoverished parents, and and it came from a creator who was willing to become vulnerable and to become a learner and to learn a language, um, and to keep his eyes and ears open for 30 years before he ever began to say anything.
Yeah.
And so um, when I began to get interested in cross-cultural ministry, that was the kind of person I wanted to be. Um, and I got involved with a group I really believed in, a group that absolutely believed that introducing the person of Jesus into to our neighbors around the world is an important thing to do. But but yet we needed to go as learners, and we had a lot to learn, as much to learn as we had to teach. And so in 1987, our family moved to live with a tribe called the Maasai tribe in southern Kenya. And this is a really proud um, warrior pastoral uh, group of Nilotic people that lived in southern Kenya, northern Tanzania. They they're wonderful people, and we moved into just a little shack, really. And the entire first year that we were there, our only task was to learn how to speak and let these people teach us the language and the culture. And that's a process that never ends. But to be given an entire year just to work on that was an incredible gift.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
so we lived in small villages. I ate anything they put before me, slept on their cow skins, traveled with them, herded with them, gardened with them, and and eventually was able to come into conversation with them as well. And so we lived there for about a 10-year period, and I continually I go back every couple years, and that's one of my homes, and those are my people, and so I speak their language, um, and I think that I didn't realize it at the time, but I truly believe now, looking back at it, from all these years later, I realized that part of what I was doing was living into my native heritage and connecting with that very traditional society in a way that enabled me to experience from not totally from the inside, but about as close to the inside as you can get and being an outsider.
Yeah.
Um, I got to be with the Maasai and to see a part of old Africa that's changing now, and um, and I got to experience it, and I've got a lot of family in that place now.
Hmm.
and people who see me as, a brother as well.
Yeah.
So that's been
Beautiful.
it's been a rich experience.
Yeah. And after 10 years there, you're able to absorb and learn this other culture. And I do want to hear about the transition to what you're, the phase in life you are now. But the question
Mhm.
about this chapter I had as I was listening, what do you think we could learn from the Maasai right now?
Well, there's so much I think that the Maasai have to teach us. Um, for one, um, they've got a great healthy self-image,
Hmm.
and they know beyond a shadow of a doubt that if it were possible that I would have been born Maasai, and so it's helped to dispel the notions of cultural superiority or
Hmm.
anything like that.
Hmm.
Um, I think that they've just been such wonderful teachers to me.
Yeah.
Um, we're living in an age where technology, of course, is dominating our lives and keeping us distracted, and to live in a place where it's changing quickly as well. But to live closer to the land, and also I think just to not have all of the props that keep us up makes us to lean on one another a bit more.
Yeah.
And I see how living in Maasai land has brought sort of an elemental tightness with other people, because you just have to rely on your neighbors. You can't live a solitary life
Hmm.
in a place like that.
Hmm.
And
Yeah.
so being able to count on myself a little bit less and count on my neighbors a little bit more is something I think that's come from my time in Africa.
Hmm. Oh yeah, man. We all need that so much. I mean, our culture is so individualistic. We depend on leaders who have like a charismatic personality. We want to just follow the hero that swoops in, as opposed to saying, actually, there are people around us we can lean on and ask and learn from and depend
Yeah,
on.
yeah,
Uh, Man, each one of these parts of your journey, we could spend a lot of time on.
absolutely.
Yeah, it reminds me of when I was a church planter years ago, and one of the one of the exercises we walk people through is telling their story, learn to tell their story. Um, and because of time and group size, we sort of gave them a time limit, of like maybe 15 minutes, the short version. And there's one gentleman who was like in his like mid to late 70s, and he went like 25 minutes.
That's just
And
barely enough time to say hello,
exactly. Well,
Absolutely.
the thing was we knew like this is not a realistic expectation for
Sure.
somebody
Sure.
who's that old.
Yep.
And he was good. He was like, I know it took a little longer. And we were like, come on, man. You got 75 years to tell. I mean, that's a big deal. So maybe we'll have you back to, this podcast to ask more details about, maybe any of these chapters.
You know, I
Um,
went, I just got back from Kenya a couple months ago, and I
yeah.
went with two of my kids went with me, and my spouse as well. And one of the one of the young guys said to my son, he said, "Your dad talks like the old people." He said, "Your dad talks like my grandpa." And I said, "That's a compliment. I'm going to take that as a compliment." I said, "I should talk like his grandpa. It's probably his grandpa who taught me how to talk. So, why wouldn't I talk like him?"
I love that. That's great. Well, you don't talk like my grandpa. My goodness, I mean, maybe you do repeat your stories. Are you at the age now where you're repeating things over and over
Uh, we'll
again?
we'll find out. We'll find out.
So, so you made this shift, when you left, and
Yeah.
you've gone deeper into your story, your roots, and now you're even, part of this really cool organization that's teaching people to do the same. and see how does that integrate in with their faith, because I think we're at a time now where not everybody, but many people, as you've mentioned, that aren't native to the Americas, but everybody was native to somewhere at one point,
Yep.
and there's a real hunger to be connected to a more transcendent, bigger story. And so, what happened in your world that said it's time to go deeper with this?
Yeah. I came back to the States and I for a 28-year period I was a pastor of a church in East Tennessee, and and it was pretty much I don't know, we had a good number of international folks. It was on a college campus. It was across the street from the seminary, and we did have a little bit of cultural diversity there, but for the most part, it's kind of Western white worship for the most part. Couple of differences was we had a bunch of people who had grown up somewhere else, a lot of folks who'd grown up abroad. Um, and I think that that sort of helped us to be maybe a little more culturally open uh, to to both the strangeness of the text, which is the Maasai used to tell me, like we're not sure about this Christianity. Maybe it came from white people, and I was able to really say, actually it didn't. This actually isn't a white thing. I mean, it may seem like it now because, white people are holding a lot of the heavy cards and seem to be controlling a lot of the narrative. But in all actuality, this is a body of truth and belief that we inherited from somebody else, who got it from somebody else, who got it in another language, who picked it up from somebody else. And I said, and when you trace this thing back, to the person of Jesus, he's a person that looked a lot like you and lived a lot like, you folks do, a lot closer to what your reality is than my reality. And so it's all that crusty colonial stuff, that I'm willing to question and to toss out a good bit of that, to get back to that more essential truth of the wisdom and the ways of the Creator. But anyway, so I did that ministry for a good number of years. Also taught in a seminary, and I taught a lot of cross-cultural ministry courses in that period, and I continued to go back to Africa and to some other places to do some work. I retired a couple of years ago, and one of the things I was really looking forward to as I was retiring from the church, I wasn't tired. I didn't want to quit. I have no desire to stop and go play golf or something crazy like that. Um, but I really want to do something that got me close to people, like real people, face to face kinds of work. And I wanted to do less of sort of all the administrative stuff that you have to do to kind of keep a body of people in motion. I was willing to do that for a long time, did it for a long time, and I'm ready for somebody else to do that. The other thing I wanted to do is I wanted to, in some way, if I could, find ways to give back and to live deeper into my native roots. And so I prayed about it and I just said, Lord, if you bring something across my way and if you show me, how to how to travel, I'll do it. I'll absolutely say yes. And so when this opportunity came up, I learned about NAITS and began to get more involved. I worked first for a couple of years as just a consultant, and I wasn't sure if it was really going anywhere, and I wasn't quite sure if this is what I needed to be doing. Um, but when they asked, that prayer came to my mind, and and it's been wonderful. It's really been good to get to know these people better, and these are Native people from lots of different kinds of backgrounds, and it's heavy on with Canadians, which I like that as well a little bit these days. It's kind of tough on Canadians here in the U.S., but but I like these people a lot, and I continue to learn from them. They're living books for me,
Hmm.
and um, and I like the work that we're trying to do of decolonizing the gospel and allowing the best wisdom of the ancient people to speak to us.
Yeah.
So that's where a lot of my study is these days, and I'm continuing. One of the things I've always done is I've worked a lot with mentoring and helping younger folks as they're learning and coming along. And so one of the things I'm doing with NAITS is I'm coordinating their mentored ministry component of the MDiv degree. That's a year-long internship, and so I'm helping with that. I'm teaching a class in indigenous ecclesiologies, which is just basically about what might the church be in the cultures of the world.
Yeah.
Um, so that's been fun, but yeah, so I'm plugging away with NAITS and also spending more time back in Cherokee land, um,
Hmm.
caring
Hmm.
for my dad who's 93 and hanging out with the Cherokees here in eastern Oklahoma.
Yeah, man, so beautiful. Um, yeah, you mentioned learning how do followers of Jesus pay attention to the indigenous ways, ancient cultures. There's just such a wrong assumption that ancient cultures were primitive, and it doesn't take into consideration all the technology, medicines, agriculture, so much to learn. And we've got this cultural moment right now we're in where the immigrant and the outsider is really being othered and picked on. And as you look in on what's happening right now around in the culture, um, what's concerning to you
Uh,
as somebody with this story in your family history?
yeah. Um, Came across a fascinating book by an Episcopal bishop named Stephen Charleston. This book's entitled "We Survived the End of the World,"
Hmm.
and in that book he talks about the way that apocalyptic times come upon us from now and again, whether it's the ecological apocalypse or whether it's displacement of people and whatever might be in our modern age, the loss of our family systems, brokenness of our homes, brokenness of our nation, return to empire. I think is a fear of mine, I guess. But Charleston says, "Hey, Native people ought to have a pretty good idea about how to live in times like that.
Hmm.
We've actually experienced apocalypse. We've actually experienced genocide. We've actually experienced dislocation, forced marches, and most of us have lived to tell about it. And so, what might we have? What did we learn that might help us to live in these apocalyptic days?" Um, and so, for me, um, looking out at what's going on in this country of ours, that's gotten meaner and more racist and in every way, I think in most lots of important ways, it's a distressing time. Um, but I've lived out in a colony of the empire. I've lived with people who have suffered under bad dictators, and I lived there while we had a bad dictator, and I realized that yeah, we can do this. We can still be people who care for our neighbors and our friends and our family members. We can be people who can live lives of integrity, people who know how to be hospitable and who strive towards justice. We can be resistors. no matter what happens. And so I think Native people, a lot of my white friends are just really shocked. They're just shocked that things are happening so quickly and descending in such a bad way. And like, I'm not shocked. I didn't have that high expectations for this country in the first place. And to me, it's just like, I don't know, chickens are kind of coming home to roost a little bit, and I'm
Hmm.
not gloating about it. I'm not happy about it.
Yeah.
Um, and like anybody else, I decry the horrible things that this is problems it's causing.
Hmm.
But I do believe that we can be steady people that hold on to one another, that look after the poor and the marginalized and the endangered, and we can we're going to get we're going to get to the better side of this eventually, maybe, but it's going to be a walk in beauty and goodness, even in all the suffering that it's going to bring.
Yeah. I mean, that's really encouraging. You kind of answered the next question I was going to ask, which is really about the history to which you belong in your lineage to the John Ross family. You mentioned that a lot of people in your family have provided leadership to the Cherokee. Um, I'm a believer. I'm a former pastor, church planter. I'm also a leadership guy, though. I've spent a lot of time in circles and offices with whiteboards and flip charts, strategizing with companies, trying to help lift people's sights to a higher cause and a way to get there that honors the needs of whatever the organization might be, but in particular, that honors the people who make up the organization. And as you kind of, I'm asking you to kind of dip into that leadership history you have in your Cherokee story, and if you were to plop John Ross as an example into this moment, what do you think he might say in terms of encouraging, lifting sights, helping people to see how to be and how to behave? I'm sure it's similar to something you just said, but I'm reframing to put it in that context.
Yeah, yeah, it's great questions. um I think of one guy who uh who said, Jesus said the truth will set you free. And he said that's really true, but first the truth is going to make you miserable,
Hmm.
and it's probably going to make you suffer. And so uh, I think that in speaking about leadership, particularly among the Cherokee, that it's impossible to talk about leadership that's set apart from suffering and trauma, and 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 I think that what's called for today is um, is for us to be willing to serve and to lead, and I think those two are connected in powerful ways, even in the midst of suffering,
Hmm.
and protect perhaps particularly in times when we're suffering. Um, we can be people of character and people of sacrificial love, and people who are filled with gratitude, strangely, even in times when it seems like things are going south, and it seems like problems are cropping up at a greater rate. um, I've been struck. I've been reading Robin Kimmerer's book, Braiding Sweetgrass, and great book. And in that, she talks in one chapter about the Haudenosaunee prayer, which is offered at the beginning of every day. It's offered at the beginning of every public meeting, um, and it's a it's sort of a prayer, sort of a call to the universe, but it is starts and it goes from beginning to end with gratitude, um, being thankful for the gifts of this day, the gift of the Creator, the gift of sky, the gift of land and trees and water and animals and even people. So I absolutely think that, in talking about leadership, I think that we need to be a grateful people, grateful for this place where we are, instead of a people who are simply, bitching about the latest occupant of the White House or whatever.
Hmm.
Um, there's good work to be done, and it's all around us.
Yeah.
And and so I would say that number one, it may be that we're in for a time of suffering, and that's okay too. That's the Jesus himself was called, um, the Prince of Suffering, and and so we're in good company in a situation like
Hmm.
that. The second
Yeah.
thing that I would say is that it's so important, um, to build intergenerational friendships. I don't necessarily call them mentoring friendships, although there's certainly elements of that. But I think in intergenerational friendships, the goodness goes both ways. Um, Older people have something to share with younger people, absolutely. But younger people often bring the vision and the energy, that we older folks need as well. And so I think Native people have always understood that there's always this relationship going on with encouraging these next generations to heal and um, and to grow and to take their own places of service in our community. It was the Cherokees, back in like 1849 or so, 48, who started the very first school for women, um, west of the Mississippi. It was like the equivalent of a high school, I guess, maybe an early college kind of degree. But Cherokees have always valued education, and some of the education happens in a classroom, but there's a lot of it that happens around the hearth and in the home as well. And so I would just say that one of the things I've tried to lean into is spending a lot of time trying to help that next generation, whether it's the next generation of church leaders, whether it's the next generation of cultural leaders, as they're growing and as they're taking their place, not from a place of privilege, not from a high tower of knowledge, but right on the ground and just walking with people, I think
Yeah.
is important.
Mm. Those are great. I'll have to go back and dig those out and put them in the show notes. Those, ways that we need to pay attention and be right now during this time. And as we finish up, another thing I was wondering and wanted to ask you is, what encouragement would you give people who are thinking to themselves, I want to go deeper with my story and with my indigeneity. How do I do it? Where do I start with that? What kind of guidance could you give for people who know that there's more to their story than I'm just an American
Hmm.
or even a white American or brown or African American, but I know I have more to my story. How do I start with going deeper with that?
Yeah. Something even more important than that, I think. I think that's incredibly important to live into our own stories and our own indigeneity. But but I think that it's easy to enshrine that, and and it can lead to an ever increasing inward journey that neglects some really important things that are happening around us as well. And so I would say that maybe a really good place to do it, maybe not talking about order so much as just saying that a couple of things need to be happen. The inward journey needs to happen, and of course that happens. It can happen in lots of ways. It can happen through study through books like like I did, or finding those elders who maybe can help to lead you somewhere else. But I would also say that that simply by cracking through some cultural barriers, that we begin to open things up in our own lives and hearts that can have surprising results. Things like learning a language, something as simple as that. Um, Making those first attempts to learn, maybe not become fluent, but to learn a few things. I think of my old dad, with that pocket translator in his overall pocket. I mean,
Right.
he didn't think that he was too old to learn something, and it was for the cause of hospitality and openness to the other that he did that. I know that he did not see himself as a man of the church when he did that. I know that he didn't do that for any kinds of egalitarian reasons, but he did that because that was a part of his heritage of who he really is at the core. And so I would say we oftentimes live in our heads, and we think that at some distant point in the future, when we've discovered our own roots and our own story, we're gonna start giving. And I would just say, figure out some ways to do that right now. You may not be able to retrieve your own tongue, maybe your people's tongue, but you can start with a tongue, and work on another language where you are. You can get to know some folks who are outsiders in this society, who absolutely need friends and confidants and helpers at this time. Um, my my son and his wife are in Nicaragua this week. She's a pastor in Maryland, or excuse me, in Virginia, and she just decided that she wanted to take a little deeper dive into Spanish, and so they've gone to do an immersion course, and she's going to stay a month, in a little village, just working on Spanish. They took the two kids with them, and John, my son, stayed a little bit and came back, but she's staying there another week with a couple weeks with one of her daughters. There's all kinds of possibilities and ways to get out. I would say another thing to do is to realize, if you're talking about Native people within North America, um, there are so many goodnesses that we can learn. I listened to an art critic from Wheaton College who said that when we want to study art, um, as Westerners, we think we've got to go to Rome. We think we've got to go to Europe, and he said, "What about all this native art that's like all around us? That's a part of the statuary that's right here in North America. That's the paintings, petroglyphs and all kinds of paintings that we find, and found objects that are carved." And he says, start right where you are. Start in the place. Look around and ask yourself, like, what can I learn about this very place? I was so happy to hear you talk about Hawassi, and saying to your kids, let's think like, who was right here? What
Yeah.
happened in this place?
Uh-huh.
And so I grew up in northwestern Indiana, and I'm just ashamed to say this to be true, but it is true that this was the place where the Shawnee created an apocalyptic village that they called Prophetstown,
Oh.
and they sent the word out to all Native people that we want you to live holy lives. We've got to quit cursing one another. We've got to quit fighting. We've got to quit drinking. We've got to come under the Creator's power. It's going to be the only way the Creator's going to save us. And they created this unified village of indigenous people, asking people to come and to be a part of this utopian community, I guess, in northwestern Indiana, near modern day Lafayette. And this was a place where white settlers got really nervous and came in and wiped these people out. And in the entire time that I grew up in that area, I never went to visit that place, didn't know anything about it. I knew a little bit about Cherokee stuff, but that's regional. I'm more interested in that than what happened here in my own backyard. And so I would say, start in your own backyard. And it may not be directly with your own people, but it's an important story as well. And you're a part of it if you live there.
Yeah.
So find some of the treasures that are right under your feet and begin to learn about some of that. And it'll probably lead you into some interesting friendships with people that who also have a lot to teach you.
It's great.
One other thing I would say, yeah, one other thing that I would say to do is simply to offer the Creator the prayer to say, "Show me, teach me. Um, I'm open." So if you'll put something in my way that will lead my steps to take that next step, um, I'll do it. And oftentimes we want to know what's going to happen 10 steps down the road. And I found that we rarely get the light for all but just that very next step of obedience or goodness. And yet, if we'll take that next step, then that makes the step beyond that plausible and easier to understand. And so I would say that take that first step
Yeah.
and then stay open. Try to open your ears and your heart to hear the voice of the Creator. And the last thing that I would say is in the process of the vision quest in Native cultures, it's always important to have good guides, and it's always important to attach yourself to a mentor who can help look after your life and who can give you some words of wisdom and who can guide you in some good ways and who can protect you a little bit as well. And so keep your eyes out for someone who may be a good mentor for you in this next phase of life, and and open your life to them, to hang out with them and to spend time with them and to do that slow business of paying attention.
Yeah. Show me, teach me, I'm open. Love it. Maybe I'll call this episode that. Show me,
Yeah, there you
teach
go.
me, I'm open. Tim, this was amazing.
Yeah, I'm just
Um,
gonna say I love that story of Samuel in the Bible.
oh yeah, right.
Uh, if you hear that voice again, you say, "Speak, Lord, I'm listening."
Yeah,
Yeah, it's a good place to be.
right. Beautiful. Yeah, thank you so much. And this time was a blessing. I look forward to more conversations with you. And if people want to find out more about you or connect with you or learn about NAITS, how can they do that?
Yeah, absolutely. You can write me at tross, TROSS, at NAITS, NAIITS.com.
Well, thanks again to Tim for being here, sharing your wisdom on how we can go deeper into our own stories. And next week we have something awesome queued up for you. But before I tell you what that is, I want you to know we are moving away from Patreon and over to Substack. So if this is helpful to you, go over to substack.com/@DavidAchata. That's ACHATA. I'm going to be writing there for the next year about transitions, in particular the transition into midlife. And we all go through crazy stuff. How do we navigate those things well? So I'm going to be writing about that, a little bit about leadership, faith, some social justice stuff, but mostly about midlife. And it's all free there. However, if you do want to support this podcast and the Substack page, you can, I think, get in for $8 a month on Substack, and that gets you a monthly Zoom check-in conversation and occasional posts that would only be available to subscribers. So go check that out. Next week, I'm excited to share we have a returning guest. From season 2, we had Brooke Lark. If you remember her story, she came out of the Mormon faith and dropped some Easter eggs that we didn't get to unpack. So she's going to talk about her transition, what happened after Mormonism, and she's going to share with us the wild world of plant medicine. So if this is helpful to you, come back next week. That interview is going to be super interesting. Thanks for being here. We'll see you next week.